We have all heard about the infamous Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky scandal. Bill Clinton, the President of the United States at the time, was involved in an affair with the 22-year-old White House employee, Monica Lewinsky. Monica Lewinsky reported their sexual encounters, and when Clinton was asked if the allegations were true, he replied that he did not have sexual relations with that woman. The problems that arose with these allegations and later on in the trial were the following. Clinton was scrutinized for sexual harassment. He lied under oath, and he tried to deceive the people that he was trying to lead. Thusly, he was convicted with perjury and obstruction of justice, leading to his impeachment in the end. In this short clip, you're going to see Clinton's tactics for trying to make a persuasive lie. The clip shows a series of scenes that we will examine further to highlight the ethics Clinton's behavior challenged.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
The words that would come back to haunt the former US president. Bill Clinton in front of reporters, defiant in his denial.
These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
And with that, he walked away. But the Monica Lewinsky saga followed him like a faithful hound. It dogged the rest of his presidency, and the press pack sought answers too. Not the ones from White House spokesman Mike McCurry, though.
Because the president's been very straightforward and very clear about what he said, and I think most Americans heard him, and they know exactly what he means, and I don't want to get into, a description of different permutations on what is very clearly an unambiguous statement.
That didn't wash, and the questions kept flowing. Clinton couldn't escape wherever he went. In July of that year, Lewinsky gave investigators a semen-stained blue dress she had worn during a meeting with Clinton. She claimed they had had 9 sexual encounters, including one with a cigar tube.
Wait. Everybody got a question. Let me give you the answer to all of them.
But he knew things would come to a head.
I know. Yes, I did. I heard all of you shouting about it. I am looking forward to the opportunity in the next few days of testifying. I will do so completely and truthfully. I am anxious to do it. But I hope you can understand why, in the interim, I can and should have no further comment on these matters. Thank you very much.
Are you standing by your public statement on Monica Lewinsky, Mr. President?
At an event in August, more questions were shouted about the thorny issue in the White House Rose Garden.
Are you concerned about Lewinsky testifying today?
Clinton's ability to start the Marine Band with a salute was sarcastically commended by the press corps.
Are you sticking with your story, your denial?
Turned to his left in that smart salute to the Marine Band. On cue, they began playing as loud as they could, which is beautiful music. But I mean, you got these things down pat.
Soon he would face the music after agreeing to testify and answer perjury charges in the Senate by independent counsel Kenneth Starr. The questioning over the precise definition of sex made gripping TV when it was released.
3, 2, 1.
You could be prosecuted for perjury and/or obstruction of justice.
I believe that's correct. These encounters did not consist of sexual intercourse. They did not constitute sexual relations as I understood that term to be defined, and in an effort to preserve the dignity of the office I hold. This is all I will say about the specifics of these particular matters.
My question is oral sex performed on you within that definition as you understood it?
As I understood it, it was not, no.
And Monica Lewinsky says that while you were in the Oval Office area, you touched her breast. Would she be lying?
That is not my recollection. My recollection is that I did not have sexual relations with Ms. Lewinsky, and I'm staying on my former statement about that.
If she
my statement is that I did not have sexual relations as defined by that.
If she says that you kissed her breast, would she be lying?
I'm going to revert to my former statement.
Okay. If Monica Lewinsky says that while you were in the Oval Office area, you touched her genitalia, would she be lying? And that calls for a yes, no, or reverting to your former statement.
I will revert to my statement on that.
If Monica Lewinsky says that you used a cigar as a sexual aid with her in the Oval Office area, would you be lying? Yes, no, or won't answer?
I will revert to my former statement.
I just am going to ask you again, in fact, direct you to answer the question.
I'm not going to answer that question because I believe it's a question about conduct that whatever the answer to it is, does not bear on the perjury, because oral sex performed on the deponent under this definition is not sexual relations. Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part for which I am solely and completely responsible.
So the first ethic that we're going to be taking a look at is to heighten receiver attention through puzzlement. All right, an example of doing this would be a use of heightened language to attract the attention of an audience to engage them further in a persuader's message. So to examine the Bill Clinton interview that we just saw, he did not use an effective strategy to puzzle the audience. He kind of forced people to make their own assumption on his knowledge of the term sexual relations, but he did no such thing to try to draw the attention of the audience. He only confused himself further in his meaning. Alright, so when you use puzzlement, he did not use an effective tactic to entrap the attention of the audience or prosecutor. He simply used a lot of simple and indirect meanings and language, and his words and messages were very unclear, so you're not really sure the whole time if he did have a true definition of sexual relations or if these events actually happened.
The second point we'll be looking at is whether or not Bill Clinton used vagueness to allow flexibility in interpretation of a legal concept. And so we can see in the videos that he definitely did use vagueness to allow for flexibility in interpretation of a legal concept. However, the question is this an ethical use of vagueness with this goal in mind? And I think we can all agree that the answer is no. So now we have to look at why. Well, President Clinton read the definition of sexual relations during the hearing process. However, he refused to clarify whether or not he did, or whether or not the certain things he did would fit that definition. And he was purposely vague by saying things like, I refer to my previous statement, I refer to my previous statement. I will not answer that question. So he was doing all these things to make it so that he could go back and clarify his statement, and so that his answers could apply to the legal concepts he was talking about, but they weren't really specific enough that anything could be pinned on him.
The next part we'll be looking at is allowing for precise understanding and agreement on the primary issues by using ambiguity on the secondary issues. So the first part we're going to look at is what was the primary issue. Well, the primary issue here is whether or not he had perjured himself when he was speaking about the alleged relationship with Monica Lewinsky. This is the first part. This is what he kind of allows to be affirmed, right? Like, he doesn't really negate, or doesn't really say that he didn't have a relationship with Monica Lewinsky. The second issue is whether or not he engaged in sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky. This part he continuously denies, and it is really the part that he uses the most ambiguity on. So why would he want to confuse the secondary issue? Well, he really needed to create his own meaning of sexual relations. This is what would determine whether or not he had actually perjured himself in the whole process. The real issue here is whether or not sexual relations fit the definition of what the prosecutors were trying to accuse him of perjuring or lying about. So was this sort of an ethical use of this? Well, using the kind of political perspective, leaders are kind of held to this higher standard. You know, they're supposed to be more ethical. They're not supposed to lie as much. They're not supposed to, you know, commit these unethical acts. His using of the ambiguous statement or statements in clarifying what a sexual relations is sort of contrasts this model. He seems like he's not using ambiguity in the most ethical way by using the ambiguity in the second issue. And even though he was acquitted, it still kind of brings into question whether or not it was actually justified.
The fourth sort of ambiguity that we looked at that Bill Clinton had put onto the American public was towards the receivers, which was the beginning. It started as... So what happened with the receivers was that Bill Clinton had two different cases when he started becoming ambiguous, towards the receivers. And he believed that he was allowed to use the sexual relations in the term he thought it, but he purposefully skewed this view towards the American public in the first, as you saw the beginning of the clip, when he first had an interview with his, when he first had the interview regarding the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And he purposefully told them sexual relations so anybody would have their interpretation, whether this meant nothing whatsoever or whether it meant, as he stated, he didn't consider certain things part of sexual relations. He used this deception to further his political career as well, because nobody wants their leaders to be involved in scandals such as this, such as cheating or lying or anything like that. So in order to further his political career, he made this ambiguous, which was not very ethical. And then, so during the initial interview, as I said, he was initially vague. Also during trial, he did the same type of vagueness to avoid legal prosecution, which is another way that you can be ambiguous towards the receivers. As you can see, he said that he had sexual relations with this woman, which caused many to interpret. He said he did not have sexual relations with this woman as his interpretation, but if you look at the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, as we've stated before, sexual behavior between individuals, especially sexual intercourse, is the exact definition. So he obviously was, according to his statements, was taking it in the first context of his own meaning, which in what we found was unethical to do towards the receivers.
To put yourself in my position, this is not a typical grand jury testimony. I have to assume a report is going to Congress. There's a videotape being made of this, allegedly because only one member of the grand jury is absent. This is highly unusual. And in addition to that, I have sustained a breathtaking number of leaks of grand jury proceedings. And so I think I am right to answer all the questions about perjury, but not to say things which will be forever in the historic annals of the United States because of this unprecedented videotape and may be leaked at any time. I just think it's a mistake.
So the final part we're looking at is, did Bill Clinton use vagueness to promote maximum latitude for revision of a position in later dealings with opponents or with constituents? So we need to look at was this an ethical use of vagueness? And no, it wasn't, for three main reasons. First, he was purposely vague about his understanding of the definition of sexual relations. This is something we've been going back to throughout the presentation. It was basically the theme of the whole hearing. Second, he avoided giving direct answers to questions, as we saw in the first clip. He said, "I will refer to my further statement. I will not answer this question." So he was being purposely vague, not answering questions clearly. And finally, he was using irrelevant information about the whole hearing and grand jury process, like we saw in this last clip. Like, for example, he didn't want to say something because it would be on the record in a video. Well, that's kind of the whole point of the situation. He's going on the record. So because of these three reasons, no, it's not ethical, because he was doing all these things, being purposely vague, in order to cover up a wrongdoing that he admitted at the end of the first video we watched.
So as you can see, Clinton uses many strategies for trying to get away with this lie. Once he was found guilty, he uses puzzlement and just shows that he was confused with what the term sexual harassment or sexual relations actually meant. He was extremely vague to the public and ambiguous within his testimony. Due to the 5 points that we discussed throughout this presentation, Clinton performed his testimony and comments to the American people very unethically. The trial exposed Clinton's attempted deception, resulting in his impeachment. Thank you for listening.